I'm going to continue reading in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. The last reading was verses 1 through 12, not 1 through 13, I think I said. 1 through 12. And Paul is talking about how by the rights given him by the law and God's approval, he could be being cared for by those whom he shares the gospel with. They could feed him, they could provide his needs, but he chooses not to do that because he doesn't want anyone to think he's only sharing to be taken care of. So we're reading on in verse 13. Don't you know that those who perform the temple services eat the food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in the offerings of the altar? He says, when offerings are taken and offered up in the temple, in the Jewish temple, that many of these are food offerings. And he says, don't you know the people that do the work there, they eat the food? And he's saying, so in the same way, I could be eating the food. After I serve you, I could eat food that you provide for me. In the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should earn their living by the gospel. He's saying that, by my life given over just to preaching the gospel, to sharing Jesus Christ, in doing so, the right that's given to me is that you help take care of me. But Paul has already said he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to hinder by receiving back from you like payment for sharing Jesus Christ. 15, he says, for my part, I have used none of these rights, nor have I written these things that they may be applied in my case. He's saying, I'm not telling you this so that you'll think higher of me. For it would be better for me to die than for anyone to deprive me of my boast. He wants to boast in Jesus Christ. He'd rather die than to lose that right to share Jesus Christ. Verse 16, for if I preach the gospel, I have no reason to boast because I'm compelled to preach. He said, that's what God told me to do. The Damascus Road, when he met Jesus Christ on the road, he was compelled then to preach. For woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if unwillingly, I am entrusted with the commission. What then is my reward? To preach the gospel and offer it free of charge, and not make full use of my rights in the gospel. That's his reward. That's my reward for sharing Christ, for loving you, that I get to meet with, and for us encouraging each other. What's my reward? I don't need money for that. Just the joy of knowing him and sharing his love. So today I only read those few verses of 13 through 18, where once again Paul is saying, I have the right to receive from you, but no, my reward is just to not take those things, but to share the gospel. And that's our reward, to serve him, to love people as Jesus loves them. So next time, we'll continue to read and try to understand what Paul is telling us when we're reading 1 Corinthians, his letter to the church in Corinth. So next time, we'll pick up in verse 19.